Welcome back, guys, to the channel. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and it's been a day and I haven't put out a video, so I apologize for that. I will get better at that. But I wanted to put out a video. Baltimore Ravens video is taking a while, but Julio Jones to the Titans, I find this very interesting. Okay, so I talked about on the AJ show. For those of you who watched, thank you. For those of you who didn't, be sure to check out the AJ show and give it a sub if you can. Would really appreciate it, as well as the channel. But Julio Jones, as you know, has been traded to the Tennessee Titans. The Falcons are taking home a 2022 second round pick and a 2023 fourth round pick, whereas the Titans actually get a future sixth round pick in return with Julio Jones. They are taking on his entire contract. So we're going to break this thing down. I'm going to give you my thoughts on who won this trade, explain how each team benefits, how each team wins this trade. And I'm talking about Julio Jones and himself also winning this trade. So we'll start off with the Atlanta Falcons and why, when you look at what they have going for them, why this trade was good for them, why they made out okay. So first off, you never want to have a superstar wide receiver tell you that, hey, I don't want to play for you anymore. But when that does happen, you want to avoid things along the lines of, this guy being a star. You don't want him to leave, abruptly. You don't want him to leave in a rude fashion. You don't want it to be ugly. You want to think about your fans. You want to think about the player and what he's done, what he's given you, what he's given the city. So I think the Falcons did a good job of that. Look, they start off, they free $15.3 million in cap space this year by trading him because it all went to the Titans. But on top of that, it's the rest of his salary that's going to the Titans' books. Now, again, elite receiver. So you're losing a significant player who's like leaving your room, but at the same time, you're freeing all that money. So there is a benefit to that, if there is one. You moved a star that was, in my opinion, trying to win a Super Bowl, and I think he would tell you that as well. So you moved him to a place where he could arguably win a Super Bowl. We'll see with the Titans, but they have to be considered at least contenders. So there's that. And then you move that same star in a way where he's going to Tennessee. He's going to play with A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry, and Ryan Tannehill. So when you look at that, it's a comparison. Like, you can make a comparison that, like, okay, A.J. Brown and, Calvin Ridley are in that same tier group. You may pick one over the other, but they're in that same tier group. And then you have, of course, Ryan Tannehill, who isn't as accomplished as Matt Ryan, but might be in that same group, might even be better than Matt Ryan at this point in his career. And then Derrick Henry is just something that you didn't have with the Falcons. But again, it's somewhat comparable. You're not going to a team with, these stars and what have you. So I thought they did a nice job of sending him to a place that was a comparable location but could compete for a title. When you look at what the Falcons have on the roster, they have a nearly a 1,400-yard receiver in Calvin Ridley, who is on the roster. He's going to replace Julio. But then you have Russell Gage, who had nearly 800 receiving yards last year alone. They're feeling good about him. And then Olamide Zaccheaus, who, he exploded in certain situations. I think he becomes more of their slot guy, can stretch the field. So they look pretty good considering they had to let, a superstar wide receiver go, albeit they did get picks. So I do like what the Falcons did. All in all, check one, you make sure the superstar's happy. Check two, you send the superstar to a contender. Step three, you get actual value for the superstar. You don't just release him like the Rams released Todd Gurley. Step four, this is very important. You keep it out of the media. They did a great job of not forcing this. It's not like the Packers situation, everything where, and I'm not sure all of that's on the Packers organization, but the Falcons didn't use the media in a way that would have made Julio an enemy. I feel like Julio left on good terms, or relatively good terms, with the Falcons. They sent him to the right destination. We move on to Julio Jones. Of course, gets out of the situation in Atlanta that he feels he doesn't want to be a part of any longer. So he wins in that regard. He gets to play for a contender. He gets to play somewhere, again, that has equal to greater teammates. And the thing I find, very interesting here is that he's going to the AFC. He's been in the NFC his whole career. So he's going to a completely new conference. I'm sure that'll be that'll be different. But I think Julio won. I think the Falcons won based on, what they were dealt with. And I also think Julio won in a way where his public image wasn't tarnished, because he didn't come out and say, I want to leave. He was on Undisputed talking about leaving, saying he's out of there, but he didn't know he was on Undisputed first and foremost, and they made that very clear. He did not know during the call that he was on national television explaining how he was gone and was done with Atlanta. So he kept that under wraps, and then that happened behind his back. Essentially, he didn't know. So I don't think that hurts his public image. I think the Falcons kept their public image well intact by the way they trade him to a contender. And on top of that, let's talk about how the Titans won this. I mean, now you add Julio Jones to the receiving room. You have Julio Jones, you have A.J. Brown, you signed Josh Reynolds in free agency. Dez Fitzpatrick was a 4th-round pick out of Louisville I very much like. Nick Westbrook is a draft pick from Indiana. You have Racey McMath, a 6th-round pick out of LSU. And then you have Chester Rogers and Marcus Johnson, both of which were with the Colts at one point or another. So, I mean, that's a battle there in the wide receiver room, but you have 2 stars in Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, and Josh Reynolds isn't half bad, and I'm very high on Dez Fitzpatrick long term. So when you think about that, and you think about how he wanted to go to a team that, would throw the ball deep down the field, would give him an opportunity on the deep bombs, this is a guy in Ryan Tannehill that I think is underrated based on everything that I've seen. I think he continues to get better. I'm sure part of, new head coach for the Atlanta Falcons, Arthur Smith, is sitting there like, this isn't fair. I just left the Titans, and the cool thing was I was going to have Julio Jones, and now here I am sending Julio Jones as a parting gift to the Titans. It's brutal. But here's the thing. The Titans have that roster. They have that receiver room, which to me, getting Julio Jones fully diversified the receiver core, which I like. You don't want to have 5 of the same receivers, so I thought they did a nice job with that. But the Titans adding an elite receiver, I think, is the biggest thing here, because they already have one, and they have an elite running back in Derrick Henry, so this is huge. It gives Ryan Tannehill a legit deep threat, and on top of that, they get to hang on to their first-round picks. So while they're paying a premium for Julio Jones, they're not giving up a first-round pick, and they're paying a premium instead of picks-wise, they're paying it on the books. So they take on his full contract, and in return, they're going to hold on to that first-round pick, which will likely be pretty high up in the draft. And by high, I mean like near the 30s, not high as in picking first. The Titans are a team. They're a contender. You guys know how I feel about them if you guys have seen. Their defense is a little worrisome for me. I think they've let some guys go that they probably shouldn't have. But either way, this is a good-looking football team that's going to compete. They're going to win, 8 to 11 games. I think that's probably their span there. I think Julio Jones is just going to change the dynamic on how you defend a guy like A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry, how you play Ryan Tannehill. I mean, it's going to be all different. And I think this needed to happen because when you look at the tight end position, they don't have Jonnu Smith. He is gone. They let him leave in free agency. So I like that they added Julio Jones, kind of replaces that big-bodied guy, because A.J. Brown's filled out, but he's not big-bodied the way Julio Jones is. We're talking about one of the best players in all of football, potentially the best receiver, and you're getting him at 32. When you look at what Larry Fitzgerald did at age 32 as comparison, moving into age 35, which is when his contract would be expired, you have to feel pretty good. Larry Fitzgerald was able to do a lot in that amount of time, and I feel good about Julio Jones. I mean, the question was not Julio Jones's, injury history. I think that was a little overblown. Normally it's about, that age. You hit 32, it's at the end of your prime. Do you want to spend, a 23, 24-year-old receiver to go and get him? Me personally, as you guys saw on my Rams reaction video, I said no. But for the Titans, it makes sense, and they only give up a second-round pick this upcoming year and a fourth-round pick the year after. So I think the Titans made out pretty well as long as they can continue what they're doing. John Robinson doing a nice job. Then I think they'll be fine. Will they win a Super Bowl? That remains to be seen. But I think this trade works for both sides. I think Julio still remains a legend in Atlanta, which is a good look. It just, again, it looks more like the media looks bad because, you have, well, not just the media, but mainly Undisputed coming out and having that, putting him in that rough position. But aside from that, I mean, Atlanta gets 2 picks in cap space. The Titans get an elite receiver, and they don't have to give up their first-round pick. Julio Jones goes to a contender. All parties have to be somewhat happy. Obviously, Atlanta doesn't want to let him go, but they didn't really have a choice. So, all in all, good trade. Julio Jones, I expect to have a very good season. I think if you're looking at fantasy-wise, Ryan Tannehill is a guy to add in the draft. He's going to be easily a top 10 quarterback fantasy-wise, could be top 5, with Julio and A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry. But then you look at the Falcons, and I think now, a guy that I really liked in Russell Gage, who had nearly 800 yards last year with Julio Jones playing half the year, now he looks into a 1,000-yard category in that territory. And I think right now Russell Gage is an interesting, wide receiver 2 option. Calvin Ridley moves to maybe the front of the pack here. Had he played the full season and, not missed those 2 games, there's a chance Calvin Ridley would have been near, 1,600 something yards. So, I mean, this fantasy-wise, Julio makes out well, but Ryan Tannehill is probably the biggest winner, and Russell Gage is probably the biggest winner for the Falcons. On top of that, Olamide Zaccheaus moves from the 4th guy to the 3rd guy. Unless we see something else happen, that's how it's going to be. Let me know what you guys think about this trade below. I like when there's movement personally in this league. I just do. It's not as common as the NBA, so I always enjoy when there's movement. More so when they don't go to the NFC West, being that I am a Rams fan. This is probably the best case scenario for you Rams fans out there. This is the best case scenario. He goes to the AFC. He does not go near the NFC. He doesn't even go to a Rams rival. He went to the team that the Rams beat in the Super Bowl years ago. So it's all good. But let me know below if you guys like this video. Be sure to thumbs up for me. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment and let's have some discussion about it. You guys take care, and I'll see you guys soon. Later.